What did you have for breakfast?
For breakfast, I had the same thing I eat every day, which was a wonderful egg omelet, including chopped up jalapeno peppers, onions, mushrooms, and spinach.
Sounds delicious. Optimal minimal.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite?
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
This episode is brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I do get asked a lot what I would take if I could only take one supplement. And the true answer is invariably AG1. It simply covers a ton of bases. I usually drink it in the mornings and frequently take their travel packs with me on the road. So what is AG1? AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. In a single scoop, AG1 gives you support for the brain, gut, and immune system. So take ownership of your health and try AG1 today. You will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription purchase. So learn more, check it out. Go to drinkag1.com/Tim. That's drinkag1, the number 1, drinkag1.com/Tim. Last time, drinkag1.com/Tim. Check it out. Murray, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tim.
I am very excited to connect for many reasons. Number one, from the very outset, one of my fantasies for this podcast was at some point having on a master bladesmith. And we can get into why that's the case, but I wanted that to be one of my objectives and fantasies realized in a sense. So I'm checking that box, number one. Number two is that I felt like you were somehow brought to me, not to get too woo-woo, but just in the last few months, I've had a close friend who's former special operations tell me that I had to take a class of yours at the very least to make a neck knife or some other type of knife to try to learn the craft. And then also spent time last week with a well-known film director whose son has become a huge fan of yours and is studying the craft. So on many levels, I think that this was in some form destined to be. And I would love to start with just a little bit of background. And I think maybe the easiest way to jump into it is to say, cover where you grew up and how Japan entered the picture.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to share that story with you. I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And at a very young age, I became very interested in martial arts and military history and kind of the outdoors, and watching movies like Jeremiah Johnson and so on gave me a great fascination for tools and knives and weapons and so on. And when I was 15 years old, I was lucky to attend a regional karate competition as a guest, as an observer. And that really piqued my interest. And so I actually enrolled in a karate dojo and did that for several years. And that started my real fascination with Japan. And then, of course, I kind of coupled that interest with reading books about the martial arts and ninjas and so on. And of course, samurais and samurai swords and the blades that they used. And that's kind of where the fascination with Japan started.
When did that become, and how did that become an opportunity to go to Japan? And in terms of age, you were, 15 or so at the time?
Well, I started karate when I was 15. That would be in high school. And I graduated high school when I was 17 and then turned 18 that summer. And I worked for a full year. I worked for, several months. And then the spring of the following year, while I was still 18, I did travel to Japan. And the destination within Japan was kind of predetermined for me. That was the prefecture called Kumamoto Prefecture on the island of Kyushu, the southernmost of the 4 main islands of Japan, because that's where the karate dojo was located that I was going to attend to further and continue my studies in karate.
What type of karate was that?
It's called Chito Ryu. It's spelled Chito ryu, and it's a version of Shitoryu, which is a little bit more well known. I guess it originates from Okinawa, and one of the main features of Chitoryu was a higher, more mobile stance than a lot of the other traditional forms of karate, like Shodokan or Gojuryu, which have very low, very low center of gravity stances for kind of solidity, but lacking maybe a little bit in mobility and flexibility.
So when I first came across a few of the snippets of your bio, I thought to myself, okay, this is really a conversation that has to happen, because one of the most life-changing events in my life was 1992. I was in high school, 15, and I had the opportunity to switch out of Spanish class because I'd concluded I was bad at Spanish into a different language. And my friends were in Japanese class, and I was always fascinated by martial arts, ninjas, and so on. And went to then Japanese class. 6 months later, had the opportunity to leave the U.S. on my first extended trip overseas to a sister school, which was in Tokyo. So at 15, went to Tokyo and stayed there for a year in a Japanese school with a Japanese family. And at that time, just I'm going to not really a digression, because I feel like I want to share this with you, so there's a little bit of common ground. I remember the first time I went to a karate school in Japan to take a class, and I went to a Seidokaikan. I went to a Seidokai school. And that was my first introduction to leg kicks, and mainly on the receiving end. And I remember
you were the punching bag.
I was the punching bag, and I remember I came in and they're like, oh, this was like former, or at the time current wrestler, foreigner. I was the only one in the school. And they're like, okay, well, like let's see how you move around. And no head contact. And so I'm punching this guy in the chest. And every time I punched him in the chest, he would kick me in the leg. And I said, well, that's a great trade. I'm just going to punch you in the chest all day. You can kick me in the leg as many times as you want. And I couldn't go to school the next day.
Because your leg was all swollen.
Because my leg was ruined. How did you then go from, I guess, two questions. Number one is, how did the opportunity come about for you to travel to Japan to further your studies? And then secondly, where did blades come into play?
So, when I was in high school, I really caught a travel bug, and that kind of fed into my fierce kind of independent spirit. And although it wasn't really popular at the time, I started hitchhiking when I was 14 years old, and I found the wondrous joys of being able to hike out to a highway and stick my thumb out and get to places I wanted to get to without having had to save up money to buy my own car or pay for the insurance or pay for the gasoline. It was a wonderful experience. And I traveled all over the province of Nova Scotia doing that. And, the more I did it, kind of the more obsessed and compelled I felt to do that. So by the time I was 16 years old, I actually traveled to Europe by myself over the school Christmas vacation and spent 3 weeks in Europe visiting some acquaintances and also, venturing to places I had never been by myself before. So after high school, I was very keen to travel. And although I had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that, studies were awaiting, and that there was an expectation, both self-incurred and through my family, to attend higher education, I couldn't ignore the overwhelming desire to travel. So after high school, I started to put this trip together that really was supposed to be a round-the-world tour. When I was still in high school, one of the seniors that graduated 2 years before me had done a round-the-world tour. At the time, I believe you could, through some different airlines, you could purchase a very special plane ticket where, so long as you kept moving in the same direction around the globe for one set fare, it was something like $6,000 or something at the time, you could continue to keep flying to different destinations so long as you kept moving in one direction, so that eventually you would end up in the same place that you started from, and then your ticket would expire. So it was a round the world airfare basically. And when this senior came back from his world trip, his story was featured in the local newspaper, and I read it in its entirety and became very inspired and thought, wow, that's exactly what I want to do, is emulate this round the world tour. And so I concocted a plan that would have me hitchhike across North America, and then from the West Coast, depart to Japan and stay there for 6 months, where I would continue and further my education in karate and hopefully have some sort of cultural experience while I was there. But I didn't know what that was going to look like. And from there, I was going to travel around the rest of Southeast Asia. I had planned to take a cargo ship, I think, from there to India, and then another cargo ship from India to Africa, and travel through Africa and up through Europe and back to Nova Scotia, my hometown. Now, that was the plan. And I had budgeted time for it. I had budgeted money for it. And, I was in the process of actively trying to establish connections and links and leads, so that I would know people at some of these destinations I was hoping to get to. But I probably had 30 or 40% of it figured out, and the rest I was just going to wing it as I went along.
It's a good ratio. I think that's actually a very good ratio.
Well, just like your friends in certain communities, the high speed, low drag. There's a beauty to not being chained down with too many plans or promises. So
yeah. Well, as a friend of mine, Rolf Potts, who wrote a book that had a huge impact on me called Vagabonding, who is a long-term traveler. Ultimately, the ability to improvise is more valuable than a lot of the planning you do on the front end, which you put differently. And so you get to Japan, you have this 40% figured out. What happens?
Yeah. So as fate would have it, so I immediately enrolled in the karate dojo, what they call a Honbu dojo, which is like the headquarters for our style of Chitoryu karate. And I just want to say, I want to put a plug in there that they were very, very kind to me, and it was a great experience. And I can't say enough kind things about that, about the people that I met there and the sensei who was there. But I digress. I was very keen. And every morning started at 6 o'clock, where we would meet and go into a special tatami mat room and light incense and kind of give homage to the ancestors of the karate sensei's family, who who started the whole thing, who had passed on. And then we would go to each corner of the room, each one of the participants, and sit in zazen, or basically sit on your knees, with your feet kind of tucked up underneath your buttocks for 30 minutes. And it was absolutely excruciating, and your feet would fall asleep, and you were wondering why in the world you traveled across the globe to find yourself sitting in this excruciating position for 30 minutes every morning. But after that, 6:30, the bell would ring, much to our relief, and then we would go off and we would meet in the karate dojo at 6:45, and we had practices every morning like that, and then we'd have practices 3 times. I think it was Monday, Wednesday, Fridays in the evening. And, I was just in karate heaven, and, I was practicing with some guys who would progress on to be world champions. So I really was amongst some great skill and talent and dedicated folks. But what happened, the connection to knives was this. Roughly around the 4th week of practicing karate, it was one of those evening practices, and we were doing, let's see if I can recall what it's called, a jumping flying sidekick. And so you would kind of run up, you're going to do the triple jump and launch yourself into the air and do a side kick at some imaginary target. No one ever taught you that if you actually made contact in that position, what you would do next, but mostly it was just flying through the air. I think we were very ill prepared for actually kicking anything in that manner. You certainly wouldn't want to go running up and jump at a wall and try to kick it, because I don't think the outcome would be very favorable. But anyway, when I was coming down to land from that position, I didn't quite have my feet and knees in front of me. And so I very much had one of my legs, I think it was my left leg. I was kicking with my right leg, and my left leg, when I came down and landed, I dislocated my knee.
Ugh.
So it was, fortunately, it was kind of a mild dislocation, but it was a dislocation nonetheless. And I had to go to the hospital and get a bunch of liquid removed from somewhere in the knee joint. And the doctor there put a cast on my leg that basically went from my left ankle all the way up to my, top of my thigh, my left leg. And he said, I had to keep it on for 3 weeks. And that's the curse of being an 18-year-old. You think you're invincible. So, of course, I convinced them to take it off, I think, after 1 week. And I never ever fully recovered. In fact, it turns out I've got a completely torn ACL, and I've been living with it and managing just fine for all these years ever since, almost 30 years later. I'm 47 now. So now I'm immobile, and I'm in the karate dojo, kind of in the barracks, we'll call it, and not really able to practice. And the karate teacher comes in. Chitose Sensei was his name. Great man. And he kind of threw a Japanese language textbook at me, and I couldn't tell if it was an aggressive throw or a kind toss, but either way, it really was an amazing gift. And up to that point, I had acquired no Japanese language ability. And here was a textbook that was a very well-written textbook. And I started to read it and work through the problems and started to study the language. And that changed everything.
And what was the consequence of adding some Japanese speaking ability to your skill set at that point?
Well, I think you're aware, because I could tell from the way you've spoken some Japanese words that you've acquired quite a level of proficiency in the language. But it opened up a whole lot more doors to me, and of course, it opened up conversation. It opened up friendships. It opened up the possibilities of travel, pursuing hobbies outside of karate. I thought that I had a very kind of open mind when I went to Japan, but in hindsight, really, I was just bonkers for karate, and I really wasn't seeing much outside of that world. But once I started to learn the language and made some friends who were outside of the karate circle, that's when everything really opened up for me, and a lot of doors opened, and that's what opened up the possibility to start studying bladesmithing.
So I had a very similar experience, different domain, but not too dissimilar. I went to a school in Tokyo called Sakemoto Gakuen, which is in Kichijoji. So for those people in or eager to visit, say, Tokyo, the Inokashira Park is right next to or very close to where this school is located. And as a student, I had to wear the uniform. It looks like a sort of a Chinese, like Mandarin collar, odd looking seifuku, as they call it. And
I'm glad they had your size.
Oh yeah, they needed to do some special work to get a first year high school student to fit this jacket. So I was actually very fond of having a uniform. It simplified things dramatically. So I had this uniform, and as part of the school, it was very much Where's Waldo, in the sense that I could easily be spotted as the only American in this school, 5,000 Japanese, and everyone had to do bukatsu. So bukatsu is
after school activities.
Exactly. You have to choose a club. It is mandatory, or was at least at Seike. So I had to choose between, the clubs that were eager or interested in potentially having me were rugby, because they're like, all right, you're bigger than most first years, so that'll be an asset. Kendo, which I was interested in already, and that's where I thought I was headed. And then judo approached me. And judo, I thought, at the time, was very much like, say, Aikido, where it's some guy comes at you with this very exaggerated faux knife thrust, and then you whip him around and Steven Seagal him to the ground. I was like, well, it's not terribly interesting to me, because from all the wrestling and so on that I've done, I'm more interested in a resisting opponent. And I was like, okay. And then the judo guys taught me or showed me very quickly that judo is very much full contact and really similar to wrestling. And when at the time I couldn't read a single kanji, so the Chinese, for people who are listening, Chinese characters adopted by the Japanese, had a basic grasp of the syllabaries of Japanese, so the hiragana and katakana, but otherwise was really at a where is the bathroom, thank you, good morning level of Japanese. And it wasn't until I had the motivation to get better at judo and realized that the best textbooks were all in Japanese at the time, at least, and then had friends support me by pointing me to comic books that I could use to learn dialogue, that all the doors opened up, like you said. And I just want to speak in defense of Japanese people for a second here, which is to say that a lot of non-Japanese who visit Japan come back and they're like, oh, the inscrutable Japanese, they're so xenophobic and they're so hard to connect with. And I don't think that's actually a fair assessment in most cases. The Japanese, this is a bit of a rant, so bear with me, but when the gods of the universe were handing out phonemes and sounds, the Japanese got a pretty short hand. They didn't get a lot of sounds. So Japanese are very insecure about their ability in other languages and have trouble, as most people know, distinguishing between L and R and so on. And they, as a result, have a very rote-driven approach to memorizing, say, vocab, but they shy away from speaking or trying to speak English. And I think that is, at least in my experience, the main barrier. As soon as you speak, you can hold a 2-minute conversation or you have a dozen phrases memorized. I mean, they will literally clap their hands. I mean, you've seen this and go,
oh, sure.
Whoa! Yeah, exactly. And like the response that you get is so exaggerated, but wonderful in Japan, that as soon as you make the effort, like all of the doors open, and it's just, so that's, I'm going to shut up now, but I hate to hear the Japanese described as, so arm's distance and so on from people who have not taken the time to learn even 10 words in Japanese.
Sure.
But so I get very excited and I feel like there's someone who's had a similar experience. So how did the blades then come into the picture?
Well, I just before I get into that, I just wanted to comment on your experience in Japan. And it's cool that we were in Japan at the same time, because I've been there since 1988. So in 92, I was up to my eyeballs in bladesmithing and all sorts of other things. But I just wanted to say that your astute observations about the Japanese culture and the way you picked up the language and the unique experience that you had, it's commendable, really, because I think you understand that of the 10,000 people who've had a similar experience to you, your understanding and appreciation and comprehension of what you actually underwent and the Japanese heart and the Japanese psyche, the Shimaguni Konshin, it's really commendable, your level of appreciation for what you underwent.
I appreciate that. It was a complete life changer for me and fundamentally changed my entire trajectory. And I'm still in touch with my host family. I had dinner with them about a month ago in Japan.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
25 years later.
But I don't know if you know that the day after tomorrow, I'm actually going to Japan.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's
going over for 9 days. I've got
that's exciting.
An appointment to buy a new power hammer and going to visit with some steel manufacturers, and then do the regular rounds of Osaka, Sakai, Kyoto, Fukui Prefecture, up to see my teacher, Mr. Yasuyuki Sakemoto, in Nagano, and then back down to Tokyo. So that's just around the corner for me.
So jealous.
This is a nice warm up.
And so you mentioned your teacher,
yes.
your master. So your knee is taken out.
Mm-hmm.
You have a book kindly or aggressively tossed at you, not sure, but nonetheless, is the tinder for getting you to dip your toe in Japanese communication.
Sure. Well, I like the Tinder example because it certainly ignited quite a passion in me, and it certainly ignited that fuel. So, well, what happened was, I think within the first day I was at the karate dojo, one of the fellow students there, Chikahiro, I think his name was, he had a little scooter, and of course, the ubiquitous scooter all over Japan, the little 50cc scooters. And he was kind enough, since I had an international driver's license and was licensed to drive it, even though I didn't have much experience on two wheels. He let me borrow that scooter for a day, in between karate, the morning and the evening karate class. And I just, bravely, it's kind of crazy because I have no sense of direction, and it was prior to the days of GPS, but I just intrepidly took that scooter and started driving around. And I was probably into the third or fourth hour of my adventure, wondering if I was ever going to make it back to the karate dojo, that I drove past a very intriguing and interesting building. And I only caught it out of the corner of my eye because I was probably driving too fast. And it inspired me to put on the brakes and kind of think, what did I just see? And then I checked both ways and did a U-turn and drove back to this building. And it was kind of like a mon. It was kind of like a gate, an archway where there was an entrance, a driveway entrance into an inner courtyard. And beside the gate was a display window with this huge, it's what they call a kujira bocho. So it's like a huge whale meat filleting knife. And it was a display piece because of its monstrosity, because of its size. And so it was pretty clear to me that there must be some knives beyond this gate. So I kind of curiously went inside the courtyard and parked the little scooter. And then there was these glass doors into a building. And I kind of peered through the glass doors, and I could see more knives on display shelves. And so I think I probably knocked, and then it was one of those squeaky doors on the rollers, the sliding glass doors. Yeah, of course they're all squeaky because they say that the squeaky hinge gets the grease, but that's not true in Japan. They just leave them squeaky. So I ventured in, and I just kind of became just mesmerized by all of these wonderful blades in three directions. There was just knives everywhere in two or three shelves all the way up to the ceiling. There was sushi knives, and there was debabochos for breaking apart the fish, and there was thin filleting knives, and there was vegetable knives, and there was paring knives, and then there was all sorts of agricultural tools. There was kama sickles, and there was axes, and there was different hatchets and different types of hoes for like digging up the yamaimo and all sorts of fascinating things, tools I'd never even seen before. I couldn't even identify. And kind of I was always there looking at all these blades, and I don't even know how much time passed by. I'm guessing it was probably only a few minutes, but I mean, it could have been hours. I was so lost in thought and just trying to absorb everything I was experiencing. A man came in from the other side of the building, and he looked at me, and he saw I was a gaijin, and he said, "Hello." And I guess we talked for a few minutes, and I tried to communicate, because at this point, you see, I hadn't had the textbook tossed to me yet. This came before that. This was before I injured my knee. It was literally the second day I was in Kumamoto, and we talked for a few minutes, and his wife brought out a couple of glasses of cold mugicha, which is
it's my favorite thing in the world.
Oh, you like mugicha? I'm not too fond of mugicha.
So, I'm a huge fan, yeah. But okay, yeah. This was in the summer.
Buckwheat tea, because it was summer, so they serve it cold. And this was literally in June. Yeah, the late part of June. So very hot. And after a few minutes of dialogue, because he could speak a word or two of English, and I think I asked, "Hey, can I come back sometime?" And I think he said, "Dozo, dozo, itsudemo, rashai." He said, come back whenever you want. So that was like one of my first impressions of Japan. And so then I didn't visit him for many, many weeks. And then when the textbook was tossed to me, I think something must have clicked, because I thought, that's the kind of person that if I could have deeper conversation with, I think it could be really rewarding. And so that was one of the, as I said before, it was the Tinder that fueled this desire and passion to be a communicator. Of course, the irony is, having grown up in Nova Scotia, Canada in the 70s, we were all spoon-fed the French language as Canada's second language, basically from grade 1. And I had developed quite a what can I say, a complex about the French language, because I never really learned much, because I was the class clown and I was always standing out in the hallway while all the other kids were in the class actually learning something. So I managed to get myself kicked out of so many French classes that I really didn't pick too much up. So when I was headed to Japan, and people said, "Oh, Murray, you should really try to learn Japanese when you're over there, because when you come back, you could get any job you want." And of course, that was in an era where everyone thought Japan Inc. was going to take over the world, and Japan was the focus of all the movies. And of course, Die Hard was all about the Nakatomi building and the decadence and opulence of these rich Japanese corporations where they had lifelong employment. And it was really quite an enigma, and the world was fascinated by Japan, and everyone thought that, Japanese was going to be it was when everyone had a Sony Walkman, right? And they thought that Japanese was going to be the trade language in the world. So people said, "Oh, you're going to Japan? Learn the Japanese language. You'll be set for life." And I would agree with them, but it would went in one ear out the other, because I'm mumbling to myself under my breath, like, "Yeah, right. I can't even speak a word of French, and I've been exposed to it for 12 years. You expect me to learn Japanese? There's such a foreign language with a different alphabet. I mean, come on, get serious." So I really didn't have any expectations of learning the language, and that turned out to be the blessing in disguise, in so much that I just thought, well, if I could just learn one word today, just one word, just how to say thank you, or to say, actually, no thank you. I remember when someone tried to feed me raw fish liver, and I couldn't say no thank you, so I had to eat it. And I thought, I'm going home tonight, I'm going to open up that textbook and find out where it says how to politely refuse raw fish liver. And it was from a fugu, nonetheless.
Oh God. Yeah. Blowfish. You got to be careful with the blowfish.
Yeah. So because I didn't have any preconceived notion of what I should or shouldn't be able to achieve in the language, I just literally took it one word at a time, and took great delight and great pleasure in the new word that I would learn each day.
And so you now flash forward, you have this textbook. When did you go back to visit the knife shop again, or what happened when you went back?
It's a great question, and of course, I ended up spending a lot of time there, so that's a question I should be able to answer. I'm just going to make it up because I can't remember exactly, but I stayed in Japan that first stint for 9 months. And first it was with karate, and then I met the Japanese bladesmith, and then I delved in a whole bunch of different things. And then I went back to North America and enrolled at advanced reading and writing Japanese at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And I took 4 years of study in 12 academic months. And then I went back to Japan, and that's when I immediately went to Mr. Sakemoto and said, "I'm back. I speak the language now, and I really want to learn about bladesmithing." I may or may not have met him a couple of other times during that first 9-month stint, but honestly, I don't remember.
Okay, so I want to hit pause to dig into one thing that you just said, because it's fascinating. Did you just say you took 4 years of academic course load in 12 months?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so former class clown. Is that a superhuman feat? Did you just go to class all day, every day? How did you go about? What were the keys to getting that done?
Sure. So when I went for an interview with the dean of the Japanese Studies program, Mr. Hirosoga at the time, who had actually also written most of the textbooks in the day, I immediately took my interview with him in broken Japanese. and I said, please, please, please let me take the 200 level classes, both the reading and writing and the conversation. And and as I was trying to have a conversation with him, he was correcting every second word I said. He kept telling me grammar is everything. I said, come on, you understand what I'm saying? He says, yes, but the big difference between I want to eat and I've eaten. And so tense is everything. So so he was very gracious and he said, listen, if you study through the first year or 100 level textbooks in the next month and bring me evidence that you've done all the exercises and pass some verbal examinations, then I'll also let you enroll immediately in the second year classes. So I immediately enrolled in 200 level classes, while on the side I was also completing all the course material for the 100 level or first year classes. So by the time, if I enrolled in September, by the time the end of October came along, in 2 months, I had finished all of those 100 level class, workbooks and passed his expectations, and I was getting A's in my 200 level classes. So I took, the reading and writing and then the conversation class from September until probably April, when the university academic year ends. And then I enrolled in the spring 6 weeks intensive 300 level classes. And then when they finished, I took the 6 week intensive 400 level classes, which was, reading Japanese newspapers and, conducting business in Japanese and honorifics and so on. So that's how I managed to do all 4 years study in 12 calendar months.
So this was before you really took a deep dive with the bladesmithing. So
exactly.
What was driving that motivation to do so much and to really get after it? Was it hey, Japan's going to take over the world? Was that an element of it? Was it an inexplicable having caught some type of idea virus that you just couldn't kick related to Japan, but did you know how you were going to use it? I know I'm throwing out a lot here, but what was driving that studiousness? Because that isn't how it sounds like your academic career started. So what was driving that?
Well, I want to be cute and say that Japan had taken over my world. I wasn't so concerned about it taking over anybody else's. When I went to Japan, something very magical happened. The advice or the adage for youngsters for decades or even centuries has been, go it on your own and find your own fame and fortune. And I certainly hadn't found fame nor fortune. What I did find in Japan was a part of me that I never knew existed. As I mentioned before, I had grown up with a tremendous complex when it came to languages. I had never really excelled at sports. I felt in many ways that I probably hadn't lived up to my own father's expectations as the only boy, because I wasn't doing baseball or soccer or any of the other things that all the other boys were interested in. I spent most of my childhood inside watching TV and playing with Lego and just wanting to do things with my hands. So when I went to Japan and then found out I had this latent skill for languages, and I made all sorts of new friends, and nobody was judging me based on what I had accomplished thus far in my life, and it was just all new, fresh relationships. I really was in many ways able to reinvent myself. And it wasn't so much that I was reinventing myself as I was discovering parts of myself that I never knew existed. And I think that for any young person, whether it's a musical instrument or a language or a sport or really anything that they dedicate themselves to and gain a certain proficiency in, that kind of skill can give a young person so much confidence and open up so many other doors for them, and really be one of the greatest stepping stones from which, to launch the rest of your life, to step out into life on. So as I was learning the Japanese language and getting tremendously positive feedback, as you mentioned, from Japanese people, because they were just so, and this is in the 80s before, foreigners had really penetrated every corner of Japan. And I was down in Kyushu, and I remember if I saw a foreigner on the street, I would go, gaijin da, because I never saw them there. I mean, now they're, you see foreigners everywhere, but back in those late 80s, it wasn't so common. So, I got tremendously positive feedback from the people around me. I started new friendships, and they encouraged me in my language study. And I think for the first time in my life, I remember having feelings like, wow, I've got some skills. I could really be somebody. This is great. I really want to see how far I can take this. And it gave me drive and kind of passion and dedication that I never knew I possessed before. In fact, I thought I was kind of a quitter growing up because, that's what all the adult influences around me said. I was a quitter and that I'd amount to nothing. So I was quite delighted to find out that might not be true.
Yeah, what a great story. I had I'm not going to say the exact same, but a very, very parallel experience. And I really shudder to think what my life would be like had I not had that year abroad, which is very uncommon, or I should say less common in the US than many other places where a gap year is encouraged. And I don't have kids, but I've thought about if I would have any non-negotiables that I would insist on if I had kids. And the only two that I've really been able to come up with in terms of experiences are sports of some type, and could be something that is thought of as unathletic, but let's just call it sports. And then a gap year or a year of traveling in a foreign environment because of everything that you just said. I think it's just such an incredible opportunity to find yourself and find your own confidence. So I'd love to jump to now. You mentioned honorifics. So for people who don't know what that is, there are many different levels of many different ways to speak or write or communicate with another, I was going to say another Japanese person, but let's say a Japanese person, depending on how old they are, depending on where they rank relative to you, even in, say, a school environment. You would have senpai, like the upperclassman above you, and then the kohai below you, and so on. And it determines what type of grammar, in some cases, you use. And I was going to ask you, could we, I'd love to hear when you then came back to Yoshimoto-san. Some people have heard san before, S-A-N. Mm-hmm. And then above that, you would have, let's say, sama, right? And then below that, let's say you're talking to a friend or a younger kid, you might say kun, or you could even use chan, which is kind of similar to that. What is the proper suffix for a master bladesmith? Would you formally refer? Is there sort of a master suffix that you would use for Mr. Yoshimoto, or is it simply Yoshimoto-san?
Well, most commonly we just use the word sensei.
Sensei.
And
sensei Yoshimoto sensei.
That's right. So school teacher or politician or professor at university. Or master in the forge is sensei.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are language nerds, just because I don't get a chance to explore this very much on many of my podcasts, so sensei is a really interesting word to look at, or a suffix to look at literally, because you have sen, which is before, and then se, which is born in effect, but in Chinese it's totally different. It's literally, it means Mr. So you would say like Chang Xianshang. Xianshang is Mr. So you don't use it for, say, a woman. In the same way that oddly enough, like tegami, which is kind of hand paper, means letter in Japanese, but in Chinese or in Mandarin, shouzhi is toilet paper. So there are a lot of things that are the same in both, and a lot of things that are very, very different. So how did Mr. Yoshimoto Sensei, how did he re-enter the picture for you?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify one thing, that I am 17th generation Yoshimoto Bladesmith, but my teacher's name is Sakemoto.
Okay, got it. All right, so I need to. And
just for your listeners' pleasure, if they're interested in the content of this podcast, they can go to YouTube and see the history of the Yoshimoto Bladesmiths on Carter Cutlery's channel, and you can see how Yoshimoto became Sakemoto, because that in itself is a very interesting story.
Very
But
cool.
my teacher's name is Sakemoto Sensei.
Got it. Okay. So Sakemoto Sensei within the umbrella, or later then becoming, or how that became Yoshimoto. We might delve into that. But so Sakemoto Sensei.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about like when it clicked? What happened? Like how did you, because ultimately I don't want to give away the punchline, but
Sure.
we're talking about, I want to say, let's see if I can get this part right. 18 years in Japan.
Yes.
All
yeah,
right.
I was there 18 years. And so I apprenticed with Mr. Sakemoto for 6 years. And then basically was asked by him to take over the family business. He had 2 daughters and no sons and no hopeful apprentices apart from myself. And I guess I had demonstrated a certain attitude and aptitude for the, for the family trade that he asked me to assume the position of 17th generation Yoshimoto Bladesmith. He is, because he's in Nagano, I'm going to see him next week. He is a very extraordinary human being and very untraditional in the way we had a relationship of apprentice and sensei. And he was not strict, as you would imagine. People think of, the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, and standing there for hours on end doing things that menial tasks that the apprentice thinks must be meaningless. And he's just being tested, and he's just having to sweep the floor, to do the grunt labor for the teacher, and starting to feel unappreciated and abused and so on. That was not my story. Mr. Sakemoto was very gracious, and he would share with me all of his skills up front. And of course, I could only comprehend so many, so I would go and practice things he showed me, and then he would show me more things. But once we got to a certain point where he felt he had shared all of the essential bladesmithing and sharpening techniques with me that he regularly practiced, he did something out of the ordinary. He said, Murray, if you really want to learn about forge welding, I'm going to arrange for you to go down to Kawashiri and spend some time down there, because that's their area of expertise. And so I would go down to Kawashiri, and in fact, I kind of went off and on down to Kawashiri for a couple of years and mastered the technique of forge welding. And then and I would always come back to Sakemoto's forge and use it as my home base, and always apply and put into practice what I had learned there and elsewhere at the home forge. And then he would say, you really need to learn about the traditional Japanese fishmonger's knives, the kataha, the debabocho, and the sashimi knife, and all those 2 layers special kind of chisel ground blades. So you should go to Osaka, a little special place called Sakai, where they specialize in that skill. And so off I went to Sakai for several weeks, and I would be hooked up with some very, again, gracious bladesmiths there, and I would learn their trade, and I'd come back to Kumamoto, to Sakemoto's shop, and then light the fire and try to emulate or put into practice the things I'd learned, and I'd show them to him. He's okay, you're getting somewhere, and I think now you need to learn a little bit about marketing and the overall, financial aspect of running a business making knives. So you need to go to Seki City, Japan, because those guys are really savvy businessmen when it comes to the cutlery industry up there. So off I would go to Seki City, Japan, and learn what I could up there. And then again, always come back to Mr. Sakemoto and then apply what I had learned. So he taught me many important things, but he also coached me. And he was a very gracious coach, and never cruel or strict or punitive, even when he probably should have been. But very, very kind, and the most tolerant and understanding and patient sensei you could ever have asked for.
That's such an amazing opportunity. Just incredible. What for people who are listening, and I'll be honest, I would say I'm in this group as well, who don't know the steps involved with, say, Japanese bladesmithing, don't even know what forge welding is, which I would certainly raise my hand as it relates to that. Could you describe what makes Japanese bladesmithing. So people, there's certainly a sort of prized quality that goes along with Japanese knives. I wrote a book related to cooking and learning some time ago called The 4-Hour Chef, and I spent a lot of time with high-end chefs around the United States, in San Francisco, New York City, and so on. And almost every single one has at least one Japanese knife that they treat like a Lamborghini. It's only taken out for special occasions. It's meticulously cared for. Could you describe the steps in making a knife in the Japanese style and what is unique about it?
Sure. There's so much to say on that topic. I'll just try to keep it concise and interesting for your listeners. First of all, there's kind of a fundamental kind of philosophical difference between what I'm just going to loosely term Western cutlery and Japanese cutlery. And everybody knows from movies like Kill Bill and so on just how revered the samurai sword can be. People even know that often they were christened with their own names. And considered by their owners to have legendary qualities. Some of the big philosophical differences are that Western culture puts a high value on something being kind of durable and strong and tough and robust. And as a result, as that kind of extends to cutlery, we end up with a lot of Western blades that are kind of sharpened tools, and they're robust and they're durable, and you can use them for a multitude of different things. But fine cutting implements, we would not call them. We would call them sharpened tools. By contrast, the Japanese blades, at least the best Japanese blades that come from Japan, are considered to be precision cutting implements. And they are designed and built and forged and quenched and tempered with cutting performance utmost in mind at the cost of everything else. So because of that philosophical difference, there's a lot of mechanical differences in how the blades are made and the mindset of the bladesmith making them. From the materials that are chosen to forge the blades, from the fuels in the fire that's used to heat the steel to forge it, the manner in which it is forged, the medium in which it's quenched, the dimensions to which it's ground, the effort to which it's the final cutting or primary edge is honed, is all affected or influenced by this philosophical ideological difference between what the blades are supposed to be able to do in the end.
Mm-hmm. And could you describe some of these steps? Like, for instance, I don't actually really know what forging is or involves, or quenching or tempering. I really don't know what that looks like. Could you describe the process from ground zero when you're considering making a knife? What does the process look like?
Sure. Well, I'll try to share with you what I've learned in having forged and completed over 24,000 blades in my career. And a lot of the things that I've realized have come about at certain times of my experience. And I'm sure by the time I've made 50,000 of them, I might have a slightly different outlook altogether. But so one of the primary differences between a Western blade and a Japanese high-performance blade is the use of laminates. Most Western blades are homogeneous in construction, meaning they're either all carbon steel from the spine all the way down to the cutting edge of the blade, or they're all stainless steel. But throughout, they're the same kind of steel. They're all manufactured from one solid billet of homogeneous steel. In contrast, the Japanese blades are almost always a combination of two or more different kind of steels. And so you've heard the expression, have your cake and eat it too. Well, if you combine a hard and a soft steel together in the same package or in the same blade, the hard steel can be really hard and contribute to superior cutting performance. And the soft steel can be left soft so that it's super tough, shock absorbing, avoiding breakage, and also easy to sharpen. It's very difficult to get the qualities of soft steel and hard steel out of a homogeneous blade because it's all the same. So right away, we're starting with a different blade construction, and that's a laminate. The most common blade construction in Japanese cutlery is a 3-layer blade construction, often referred to as a sanmai, which means 3-layer or three sheet style construction, where the center of the laminate is the hard steel that's going to become the sharpened cutting edge, like the lead in a pencil, and the outer laminates are a softer, either mild steel or a soft stainless, and they strengthen, toughen, cushion, and make the blade easy to sharpen, and very much act like the wood on the outside of the lead inside of the pencil, and they support it. That's the most common. There's 2-layer construction, and then there's a sword construction, which is where the hard steel wraps around a soft center core, and then you can have Damascus style construction where you've got hundreds of different layers, all in different kind of constructs for either visual effect or metallurgical effect. But the laminated blade does give you the best of both worlds. It does allow you to have your cake and eat it too, because you can have a really high Rockwell hardness core that means it can take a razor sharp edge and hold that edge for a long time, but avoid the pitfall of being brittle, because the outer softer laminates support it and keep the whole blade from fracturing.
Right. And how does one make such a knife? What are the steps involved?
Yeah. So you achieve a laminated blade through a process called forge welding. And everyone knows, if you hear the word welding, you think of like a MIG or a TIG or an inert gas welder, and a big spark and a bright light. But there's literally, there's lots of different types of welding. There's ultrasound welding, there's welding with explosives, welding through friction, and so on. But forge welding is the oldest form of welding known to mankind. And that's when you take two metals that have similar temperature ranges, and you heat them up until the molecules on the surface of each metal start to liquefy, and then you join the two. You press the two together, and if you're at the right temperature and you have clean surfaces, you can actually get the molecules from each surface of the metal to intermingle and fuse together. In layman's terms, it's like taking two candles that are cold and hard, and you would heat up each end over a flame source until the end of the candle just started to liquefy. And then if you touch the ends of both candles together at the same time, in an ideal situation, you would end up with one big long candle once it cooled down, because the wax would intermingle and mix.
Right.
It's different than melting, or fusing is different than melting the metals together, where you would basically make the two dissimilar metals molten and basically mix them up in a pot like you would stir chocolate milk powder into a glass of chocolate milk. It's not that kind of mixing. It's fusing them together in such a way that each unique layer still maintains its original characteristics.
Right.
And so that's done in a forge, and a forge is a source of heat. We have gas forges, we have electric forges, and then we have what I use, which is a solid fuel forge.
What does solid fuel mean?
So I burn up coke in my forge, spoonfuls at a time. And as funny as it sounds,
what is Coke? Were we talking Coca-Cola, cocaine, something else?
Yeah, and I just purchased 4 tons of Coke the other day. Coke is, all joking aside, it's coal as they dig it up from the ground, and then it's heated once in the absence of oxygen, and it drives off all the impurities, namely phosphorus and sulfur, which are combustible gases, but that are very undesirable when it comes to heating steel to make knives. So Coke is to coal what charcoal is to wood.
I see. Got it.
It's purified carbon, because all the volatile gases have been driven off.
How is that spelled? Coke.
COKE.
Oh, it is. All right. Yeah, I was going to say a couple of tons of Coke. Unless you have a very sophisticated drug smuggling operation and a huge budget, it's probably something else.
Yeah.
So that is solid fuel.
That's right.
That's solid fuel forged. So you're fusing these different layers together and maintaining the integrity in the sense that the separation of these layers, so you can design a knife that allows you to have your cake and eat it too. What happens after that?
So once you've successfully forge welded your different layers of steel together, then you need to forge that billet, which is what it's called, into a blade shape. And some blades are wide and short, and some are narrow and long. In the case of a slicing knife, some are thicker and some are thinner. And you can set out from your billet to forge really any kind of blade you desire, providing you've got enough material to make the blade you're setting out to make. And it involves heating the steel to a plastic state, which is usually around 800 degrees Celsius. And I talk, because I was in Japan and I was in Canada, for me, everything's Celsius.
That's okay. That's all right.
I don't translate to Fahrenheit very well, but I think it's something like 1350 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's what steel it's what, when you're at a campfire and you see the orange coals down at the very bottom, they're not bright yellow. They're just kind of like a really bright orange color. That's about 800 degrees Celsius. And that's the color we want the steel to be when we start hammering it. It's very pliable in that state. You don't want to heat the steel hotter than that because you can literally burn the steel and ruin it. And you start hammering it, and if you have enough force with a hammer, you can force it into different. You can coax the steel into different shapes. Obviously, I mean, blacksmiths have been doing that for millennia. The big difference is as a new bladesmith, one is overly focused on getting the right shape. Somewhere along the line, somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 blades, I realized that something more important was happening when I was forging the steel, and that was grain refinement. As it turns out, that if you heat your steel, your laminate, your billet of steel to that 800 degrees, and then hammer the steel as it's cooling, you're actually refining the grain in the steel, which can result in a higher performing blade. So even if you make two different blades, even out of the same steel, how you heat the steel and how you hammer it and how sequentially you heat the steel will result in two entirely different quality of blades. And
when you say grain, I'm thinking of cutting against the grain or with the grain in, say, cutting steak. Is it a direction of fibers in the steel itself, or what's the best way to think of refining grain?
Yeah. So if you've ever fractured a piece of metal and looked at it, it's quite likely, even if it was aluminum or whatever, you look at the metal fractured surface and it looks like little grains of sand. It looks granular. And sometimes it looks very, very like finely granular, and you have to look very closely to discern like different bumps in the fractured surface. And sometimes it's very coarse. And basically, steel has grain, which you could think of like marbles or BBs or grains of sand. And the finer they are and more evenly dispersed they are throughout the steel matrix or throughout the billet, the finer of a cutting implement will result.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
The reason is it's not the grains themselves that make steel strong, but the grain boundaries. So where one grain touches another grain, there's something about that boundary complexity that increases the strength of steel. So the finer grain you can achieve in steel, the more grain boundary that results, and therefore a better end product.
Now you have, as you said, forged or produced somewhere along the lines of 24,000 blades, and you spent 18 years in Japan. And yet, this is another part of your story or life that really grabbed my attention. You hold classes or workshops where people can come in and over the course of a week or a few days walk away with a blade. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years now.
So after putting in the amount of time to master your craft that you've put in, what does the curriculum look like for, say, a 2 or 3 day class? Because you've clearly put so much thought into this. How do you teach this? Like what? And I always think about sequencing, right? When you're learning a language, how you provide positive feedback, but balance that with some kind of logical progression that is graspable. What does such a class look like when you're teaching it?
Sure, fair enough. Because the way we've talked about 24,000 blades in 18 years, it sounds daunting and impossible to learn anything important in such a short time frame as 1 week. But fortunately, that's not true. Bladesmithing is not rocket science, and a lot of the mystique and lore of bladesmithing is simply because a lot of the obvious things about blades are hidden in plain sight and not often revealed and not often taught. Now, what I mean by that, let me quantify that. The main skill that I teach or confer in a short amount of time is I teach students how to use their eyes and how to see what's actually there. Now, obviously, we were talking earlier about grain and steel and so on, and we don't actually get out microscopes and look at that. But I teach them to see if blades are straight. I can teach them to see if the blades have the profiles that they're looking for as they grind the blades. I teach them to pinpoint trouble areas, and then pinpoint the remedy for that, like with grinders or a hammer or a file or whatnot. But I teach them, and through repetition, I teach them to start to rely upon their eyes and to trust their eyes, so that when they actually see something, they know what they're really looking at. And in terms of the metallurgy, after we forge and anneal and quench and then temper blades and then grind them, I teach them simple things like how to test to see if an edge, if the edge of the blade, or if the whole blade actually hardened by cutting into other metal objects. I teach them to do a rudimentary test to see if they've got fine grain, and if they quenched it at the right temperature and tempered it properly, if they push a thin edge against an object like a brass rod, they should be able to see the edge flex. And then when the pressure is removed, they should see that flexed portion spring back to a true edge again. And then last but not least, part of what we do is we place a lot of emphasis on hand sharpening of the knives on sharpening stones. And I teach them to pay attention to how the blade that they forged and heat treated, how it feels on the stone when they're sharpening it. So between a sense of touch and feel and using one's eyesight, it's actually a remarkable testament to the human condition to report just how much the average student can learn in the space of a week. It's really remarkable.
And if you were looking back at the students you've taught, the people you've encountered in the process of teaching and making knives, certainly, if you were in charge of talent scouting, let's just treat it as like the Oakland Athletics Moneyball type approach. Your job is to put together, slightly different, but you're trying to put together a team of people who have the potential to be great bladesmiths. Mm-hmm. What are the attributes that you're looking for to put together that team? Like, how would you try to spot the potential for someone who can be great at this? What are the patterns you've noticed or things you've observed?
Well, that's a very timely question, Tim, because we actually are actively growing Carter Cutlery. And as we spent the last week hiring our 10th employee. So very timely question. I look for two very specific things. I look for aptitude and attitude. And the aptitude is, somebody's ability to acquire new skills or to use the skills that they already have. And I look for attitude, which is a willingness to learn, a willingness to be humble, a willingness to stick to something once you've decided that that's what you're going to do. So stick-to-itiveness, and a willingness to work in a team environment. So those two qualities specifically are what I'm looking for.
So on the, I suppose, the aptitude side of things, the ability to learn, the ability to be humble, the ability to stick, so the stick-to-itiveness and the teamwork, how do you test for that? In other words, how do you determine if someone has that or not?
The attitude.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Any of those things. In other words, if you're looking at it as a hiring process, so some people use interviews, some people use test projects for hiring for many different skills. How do you determine if someone has the capacity to learn, the ability to be humble, stick to something, and work in a team?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I found that the only accurate way to make that assessment is to put the candidate in the actual work environment. Because two things can happen. People who claim to have great aptitude and attitude will reveal that they actually aren't that equipped for that position. And conversely, people who think they might be, once they get into that environment and are encouraged in the right way and surrounded by the right kind of people, and with the right, can actually develop a healthier mindset better than they even came into the interview with. That can be nurtured. So I think the best solution is to get the applicant in the working environment, and then just work with them as closely as possible and encourage them in every way you can, and be in constant communication with them. And I think usually within a week or two, you have a much better idea than just simply an interview or viewing the portfolio or reading a resume alone can provide.
For sure. Yeah. And for those people listening who would like to explore this aspect of business, meaning hiring or even more specifically auditioning people, Matt Mullenweg, who's been on the podcast, CEO of Automatic, thought of as the lead developer of WordPress, has a very, very fascinating process for auditioning people, whether they are the entry-level customer support or a CFO. The process is remarkably similar. So that's worth digging into. I have a couple of questions that are really not organized by any particular theme. I'm just curious to know the answer. So the first is, in many knives that are supposedly Japanese style that you can buy easily in the West, you find these dimples on the sides of the knives. And sometimes they're called santoku, sometimes they're called something else. What are the functions of those dimples? Do they matter? Are they done well? How should someone think about those if they really have no familiarity with knives?
Okay, well, I think what you might be referring to are kind of like a hammered texture into the upper surface of the blade, and sometimes what you might be referring to is what's called a graton edge, where the steel is actually scalloped out.
That's right. Yeah. So it looks like I think it's concave. I think I'm getting this right. Say ellipse or a semicircular carve out, and they're across.
And Henkel's is well known for that. They put out a kind of a Japanese style santoku shaped blade that has a graton edge, where right behind the primary cutting edge of the blade are these scalloped out depressions in the blade.
That's right.
Yeah. And the concept is that when you're cutting something that has a high moisture content, like cucumbers or tomatoes or whatnot, that rather than sticking to the blade and then being pushed up by subsequent slices to the top of the spine of the blade and then being bopped off the blade and rolling off the table and onto the floor, the idea is as you're cutting, the cut material will separate more easily from the secondary edge of the blade. In concept, it can work. I don't like it for several reasons. First of all, if you have a blade that is thick enough behind the cutting edge to grind in scalloped indentations, for me, that means the blade's simply too thick.
Right.
Because the thicker the blade, the more resistance it is to push the blade through things. Many people need to understand that when we think of the word sharp and blade, there's actually two phenomena. There's the primary edge, which is the part of the blade everyone thinks of when we think of sharp, that initiates the cut. It's the part that goes into your finger first before you see the blood. And then there's the secondary edge, which is the geometry of steel behind the primary edge. And the secondary edge is what becomes consequential when you're actually trying to push the blade through things, whether it's an acorn squash or a big, thick rubber stall mat, like that you might be standing on in your shop to save wear and tear on your feet. If you're trying to, or thick shoe leather, if you try to push a blade through things, then what's going on in the secondary edge is absolutely important. As much, if not more important, than the sharpness of the primary edge. And in cooking, we often need to push the blade all the way through things, whether it's cucumber, carrot, apple, potato, whatnot. So the thinner the blade, the better. So if you've got a blade that's got graton edges on it, your blade's simply too thick. And one of the first things we do to remedy that when blades like that come into our shop for sharpening, refurbishment, or repair is we grind the blade down, by a certain percentage and remove some of those graton edges. But the resulting thinness of the blade greatly enhances the cutting performance. The other thing I don't like about those is they're not necessarily sanitary. That's an area where bacteria and food particles can hide out in. And in an ideal world, a blade for culinary use is very clean on both the primary and secondary surfaces, so that once you're finished using it, you simply put it in a cloth, and with one swipe, you can get the blade completely clean. So it's very low effort to keep it clean and sanitary.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, so having spent so much time in Japan, I would love to know if you have any Japanese sayings or mantras or anything that have really stuck with you. And I'll give people just a few examples of proverbs, for instance, like kotowaza. So there's some great ones in English as well, of course, but you have like sarumo ki kara ochiru, right? So even a monkey falls from a tree, which means it doesn't really matter like how good you get, you can still fall on your face. In effect, there are other uses also. But then you have something that is actually pretty similar to tall poppy syndrome in, say, New Zealand and Australia, where people who stick out too much can be pulled down, and that's deru kui wa utareru, right? So the stake that sticks up gets hammered down. So if you stand up, you could be criticized. One that is great that I really like also is shiranu ga hotoke. So the not knowing is Buddha, literally, but it's ignorance is bliss, basically, or what you don't know can't hurt you. Is there anything? Are there any sayings in Japanese or principles that have really stuck with you?
Tim, you and I are really two birds of a feather. So we share so many similarities, and kotowaza was one of my areas of, I was kind of considered a nerd during Japanese language study at University of British Columbia, because I loved coming in with new kotowazas to share with everybody. But one of my favorites is isogaba maware.
Okay.
Meaning when you feel yourself in a great hurry and a kind of a panic to get things done, that's the time to take a moment and regroup and take a deep breath and to really get your footing to make sure that you're making good decisions. So I really like that one. I like ishi-bashi o tataite wataru, proceeding so cautiously as to tap with a stick every single stone in the stone bridge as you cross it, just to make sure the stone bridge isn't going to fall down while you're on it. So it's used often to illustrate an extreme level of caution and prudence.
And do you apply that in your life to knife making, to other things? Where does that come to mind for you most?
Making business decisions.
I got it. Okay, right. So definitely measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, except this would be like measure 10 times.
Right.
Sometimes it's used to sarcastically for someone who's so cautious as that they become petrified from doing anything.
Right.
I also like awatezu, aserazu, isoge. It's and this is a special one in the cutlery industry, which is don't panic, and don't be in a rush, but get the job done.
What was the first one that you mentioned? The when you feel
Isogaba maware.
Isogaba maware. That's such a good one. Yeah, when you feel rushed, when you feel like you have to get everything done this instant, that is a great time to hit pause.
And lastly, sometimes when we're in the blades shop and when you think you've seen it all and done it all and suffered every single setback that there ever could be in the blade shop, sometimes we become kikara ochita saru, which is a different version of your saru demo kikara ochiru, meaning that anybody can fall. Kikara ochita saru is when you become kind of bereft by some kind of unexpected setback, such as being run off by your wife or something like that. So when something in the shop goes awry in such a way as no one ever saw it coming, we can be the kikara ochita saru.
I love it. Well, I know that we are coming up on time shortly, so I'm not going to ask too many more questions, but we could talk for days and days and days, I am sure. So maybe we'll do a round two at some point. But
maybe we'll actually get to talking about bladesmithing and knives.
Well, yeah, I think that the people who are with us at this point in this conversation are already converted and fascinated. They are more interested in knives now than they were when they turned this on. So I think we could talk for days about many different aspects of knife making and the shared DNA that we have through Japan. But let me ask just a handful more. And I'm already happy with the conversation. I'll use this to round it out. What books have you gifted the most to other people or reread the most yourself?
As a child, I was fascinated with the book Ivanhoe, and I love the story of knights and kind of heroism and altruism and fighting for a great cause. So I kind of have a romantic notion of right and wrong and good and evil. But in terms of the book I've given away the most, of course, that would be Bladesmithing with Murray Carter, of course, the book that I first authored. It was the first of 3 books that I've authored. And it's a great instructional book on bladesmithing techniques in general, but more specifically, the application of traditional Japanese bladesmithing techniques.
Besides your own books, which I also recommend people check out for sure, any others that you've gifted to people that come to mind?
I would say I'm probably delinquent in the fact I've not given many books as presents in my lifetime. I should thank you for the idea. I now have next year's Christmas presents figured out.
Wait, all right. Well, let's look at it differently. When you gift, are there any items that you routinely gift to people? And if the answer is knives, what is your go-to gift knife? What type of knife? What characterizes it?
I have probably most noteworthy is the fact that I wear a knife daily, usually in the form of a neck knife. It's a kind of knife that we hang from our neck, inverted upside down very securely in a thermoplastic sheath called Kydex. And it's a really handy blade to have. It's the alternative to a folding knife in the pocket. And there's no mechanism to break, and it's easy to sharpen, easy to maintain, and very strong for its size and excellent cutting potential. So I've been carrying neck knives for my whole career as a bladesmith, and I typically will meet some person who inspires me in some way. They might be a young child, might be the son of a good friend, Might be a housewife who I think could use some protection while walking in the park. But I have given more knives off of my own neck that I've used for several weeks or months or years that I know are really good, high performing, and great cutting knives. I've gifted a lot of those away.
That's a great answer. I love, neck knives. This is also something that I've been somewhat obsessed with in the last few weeks. So that's to be continued.
So when are you going to come and take a class?
You know what? When we hit stop on this recording, I want to talk to you about that because it's something I would like to do ASAP, ideally before the time that this episode comes out, or at least get a reservation in. And so the last two questions. This one is if you had a gigantic billboard, and this is more of a metaphorical question, but you could put a short message on that billboard to get it out to millions of people that is non-commercial. What would that, or what might that message be?
Well, I mean, I could put something cliche on there like "Don't give up." I could put "Stick to the plan." I had written on my walls over in my Japanese shop, "Stick to the plan," and the other one under that was "Concentrate on the task at hand." It's so easy to get distracted, from new stimuli, that focusing and concentrating on the task at hand is often, even though it's a simple concept, it's difficult to execute. So those are some kind of like truisms or sayings that I live by.
What does "stick to the plan" mean to you most often? Why is that one of the two that you chose?
Well, in quiet moments, we always sit down, either alone or with loved ones or people we trust, and we plan. Humans plan. They say first, maybe of these three things that probably need to happen, we should do this first, and then this second, and then lastly, we'll achieve this. And as is so common in life, people sabotage their own plans. They get to a certain part of the plan, and it becomes monotonous or tedious or difficult or challenging. And all of a sudden, instead of sticking with the plan and seeing it through to completion, they think, "Oh, what I need is a new plan."
Right.
And so you have people who habitually, chronically are in the process of making new plans and never actually execute a single one of their existing plans.
Is that something that you've struggled with, or is that? It sounds like you have that pretty well handled. So I'm wondering, is it more a reminder for your employees, or what is? How have you used that reminder in your life or for other people?
You're right. I've been lucky to have stuck to most of my plans and achieved the goals I've set out for myself because I've constantly reminded myself to stick to the plan.
A good answer. Yeah. Very good answer. All right. Do you have any parting, and I'm going to also ask you before I wrap up, of course, where people can find out more about you and so on, and I'll put those links in the show notes for everyone, but any parting comments or requests, thoughts for the people who are listening to this?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for listening. And of course, I can find out more about our knives at cartercutlery.com, CarterCutlery.com. And, we do strive to make the finest knives in the world, high performance blades that are also very easy to maintain. And we've successfully encouraged and mentored tens of thousands of people to learn the very easily attainable skill of sharpening knives, and we've kind of revitalized that essential skill, and given a lot of people the great feeling of mastery and satisfaction over their cutlery and being able to maintain it and sharpen it and use it to their heart's content.
Could you give, just with that teaser, could you name one thing you wish more people did related to knife sharpening, or one thing you wish people would stop doing?
Well, I'll give a little freebie out there for everybody, and that is that when they get a new piece of cutlery, especially one for the kitchen, if they will just keep that cutting edge from touching anything other than food, meaning don't drop it in your kitchen sink, don't let it touch other plates and pans, don't let it touch the other silverware in the drawer. And that will preserve the cutting edge, the primary edge of that knife, far longer than they ever thought possible. It's the clanging around of the knives, the misplacement of the knives in the kitchen that really dulls them. So that's a little freebie for everybody.
So they shouldn't use their kitchen knives for opening boxes from Amazon, in other words.
They can do that after they master sharpening, and then don't have to worry what they use their knife for, because they know it's only a couple of minutes until they can refresh both the primary and secondary edges of their knives.
All right. Well, Murray,
it's freedom. That's the real freedom.
That is the freedom when you can maintain and master your own tools. And everybody listening, you can also find Carter Cutlery on Facebook, facebook.com/Carter Cutlery, Instagram, fantastic Instagram, also Carter Cutlery. And I will put all links to everything we've discussed in the show notes as usual. So everybody listening can find all of that as well as more resources and so on at tim.blog/podcast for this episode and every other episode. And Carter, I always want to call you Carter. I have a good friend named Carter. Murray, thank you so much for taking the time. There's an expression in Japanese, which I'm sure you've heard before, which is saisho de saigo. So when you do something and you never want to do it again, that's saisho de saigo. I have the exact opposite feeling with this conversation. I hope we have many, many more. So thank you for taking the time.
Hajimatta bakkari.
Exactly. Hajimatta bakkari nanda. So, and as some of my Japanese friends said to me with this bewildered face in high school, they would say, "Oi, omae Nihonjin da yo." So I have that feeling with you, which is that you are secretly part Japanese, which I mean is the highest compliment. So to be continued. And thank you again. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you and continue the experiments. Be nice and be safe. Hey guys, this is Tim again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number one, this is 5 Bullet Friday. Do you want to get a short email from me? Or would you enjoy getting a short email from me every Friday that provides a little morsel of fun before the weekend? And 5 Bullet Friday is a very short email where I share the coolest things I've found or that I've been pondering over the week. That could include favorite new albums that I've discovered. It could include gizmos and gadgets and all sorts of weird shit that I've somehow dug up in the world of the esoteric as I do. It could include favorite articles that I've read and that I've shared with my close friends, for instance. And it's very short. It's just a little tiny bite of goodness before you head off for the weekend. So if you want to receive that, check it out. Just go to 4hourworkweek.com. That's 4hourworkweek.com, all spelled out, and just drop in your email and you will get the very next one. And if you sign up, I hope you enjoy it. This podcast is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. I reached out to these Finnish folks, young entrepreneurs, very talented, after a acrobat introduced me to one of their products, which is mushroom coffee. This specific one includes chaga and lion's mane, and it knocked my socks off. I highly recommend if you try it, you start with half a packet. It's very strong and lights you up like a Christmas tree in the best way possible. People are always asking me what I use for cognitive enhancement, and for right now, this is the answer. I try to force this on all of my house guests. It is a hell of a thing. If I have employees or people come over who are working on projects with me, I always try to feed it to them because I'm going to get the limitless effect and get a lot more out of them. The first time I mentioned this product and Four Sigmatic on the podcast, their product sold out in less than a week, so you may want to check them out soon if you're listening to this. And the coffee tastes like coffee. It takes just seconds to prepare with hot water, and oddly enough only includes 40 milligrams of caffeine, so it has less than half of what you would get in a regular cup of coffee. I don't get any jitters, acid reflux, or any stomach burn, any of that. It's very unusual and very, very cool. So if you don't like caffeine, they also offer very strong but caffeine-free mushroom elixirs, which I will sometimes have in the evening. I find chaga specifically to be very, very grounding and earthy. So that is another option. And I have a cupboard full of their products at the moment, which is right around the corner of my kitchen. You can try something. You can try a sample pack, which is great also, right now by going to foursigmatic.com headspace.com/Tim. That's Four Sigmatic, FOURSIGMATIC.com/Tim. And use the code TIM, TIM, to get 20% off of your first order. And they're not that expensive anyway. If you are in the experimental mindset, I do not think you'll be disappointed. So try them out. This episode is brought to you by Headspace, the world's most popular meditation app. I have it on my phone. I use it all the time when I'm in Ubers, when I'm in airplanes, when I'm in those in-between spaces, and I want to do some good for myself. Across all of the guests that I've had on this podcast, more than 80% have the common behavior, the common habit of some type of meditative practice. It does not have to be complicated or expensive. Headspace is meditation made simple. I've used it for hundreds of sessions myself. It provides guided meditations that you can use whenever you want, wherever you want, whether on your phone, computer, or tablet. They have sessions that focus on everything from decreasing stress and anxiety to eating healthier, sleeping better, and even being more creative. But I suggest you keep it simple, simple, simple. This has had a huge impact on my life. Try their Take 10 program. It is fantastic. 10 minutes of guided meditation a day for 10 days. It costs you nothing. Try it out, and I promise, and I don't do this very much, that you will see a significant benefit from it. Download the Headspace app and train your mind for a happier, healthier life. Learn more at headspace.com/Tim. That's headspace.com/Tim.